Welcome back to Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom. I'm Brendan Davis, your host, and this week I have 4 guests instead of 1 or occasionally 2 or 3. This week I'm calling this my Airport Adventures episode. The situation is that I found myself this past Monday here in Beijing needing to take a visa trip, and I was going to go to Seoul, South Korea, where I've never been. I've heard a lot of great things about it and I've wanted to visit, but I had a very tight window to make this trip that's required by my visa that I exit every 60 days. And so unfortunately this was not going to be a big sightseeing thing. This was just business, taking care of business. And what happened was our flight got delayed, and that's a long, boring story. These things happen. But what happened next was really unusual. I met some really interesting, cool people at the gate, and there are some photos that go with the blog post with this episode. You can see, there's a bit of a crowd, and some people were upset, and there were a group of us who were just kind of hanging back and seeing what would develop. And I met these 4 different people, Dan, Samuel, Alice, and Youn, who you will get to know here shortly. And they're all very different. None of them were traveling together or knew each other beforehand, but we ended up becoming kind of fast friends and had a bit of an adventure. We actually took the complimentary meal together, had a few drinks, and fortunately, one of us, Alice, was able to get us all into the first class lounge, which was really great. And there were showers available and food and drinks, and most importantly, just a place to sit and wait this out. I've certainly had delays where I've sat in the chair by the gate, and that is not comfortable. And this was the best way to manage an uncomfortable situation. But I thought that what I would do is actually record a in-the-moment interview with everybody. So I recorded the 2 guys separately, and the 2 girls were actually together at the end, and I cut it all together into one episode. And I think that you will find this interesting. Everyone has a different perspective. Dan is from Australia, and he's here as a teacher. Samuel is a student from South Korea. And Alice is an entrepreneur, and Youn is also taking a gap year from being a student, is about to go to law school. Everyone has such an interesting story, and they're going to talk about that in their own words in a minute. And I will have a regular episode with longer interviews again starting next week. But I like to have a wide variety of guests on the show, and the opportunity to have 4 different perspectives all in one episode was really something that I couldn't pass up. One quick technical note is that I recorded this on my iPhone, meaning that this was very spontaneous, and then of course I've done my editing and mastering work that I do, and I think it came out pretty good actually, not too bad. It was pretty late at night when we recorded this, and the airport was fairly quiet. Several of my new friends provided links to their social media accounts and such, which I will be putting in the blog post, so please check that out if you would like to hear a little bit more from any of them. And I hope that at some point I will get to do longer interviews with several of these people individually, but for now, I really hope you enjoyed this very special episode of the show. All right, well, first up on the Airport Adventures special edition of the podcast is my new friend Daniel Bulgaila. Daniel, how you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm going pretty good considering the circumstances.
And what are the circumstances? I would have done a little introduction, but from your point of view, what are the circumstances?
Okay, so I arrived at Beijing International Airport, Terminal 3, maybe about 3 o'clock this afternoon, expecting to climb onto a, what time was the departure?
5:10 was the departure in theory.
5:10 flight, and got here quite early. I was relaxing by the gate, and everything seemed to be going well. We stood up at boarding time to commence the boarding, and unfortunately we have been told we had to wait about 7 hours for delay.
Yeah, we're recording this. It's about 10:15. We'll call it now. We just found out we're flying in 2 hours. We're boarding apparently.
It's going to be an exciting 2 hours, considering I've met some lovely fellow travelers to share their time with.
Well, that's why I wanted to do this special edition of the show. What brought you to China?
Well, I've always wanted to live abroad, and I started investigating different ways to earn a living abroad, and I decided that I wanted to chase the adventure of becoming a ESL teacher. I took the English as a foreign language course, TEFL, and applied for an internship here in China, and here I am. I arrived here 6 months ago. I've completed my internship, and from here on out I'm planning on staying in China indefinitely.
Nice. So where's home for you?
I'm from Australia, Adelaide.
And what has been your impression? I mean, you like China. We talked about this off mic. But yeah, what is kind of your quick take of China? What's been interesting, unusual? What do you like? What do you love? What makes you think it's kind of an indefinite plan for you?
Well, it's turned my life upside down. It's definitely a different lifestyle than I'm used to back home in Australia. Different way of thinking, different way of living, exposed to a lot of different lifestyles and trends. The way people operate in day-to-day life. I think the culture shock and change is what's interested me the most. Lovely people, lovely culture, great food. What else can I say?
That's pretty good. So what are you most looking forward to in the next time here? Like, what are the things that are on your to-do list?
Definitely would like to do a lot more travel. Right now I'm posted in the north of China in a small town called Tangshan. City, I should say. Small for China. I think there's about 7 million people there.
It's hilarious that that's
I could
small,
be wrong.
right?
I could be wrong. I need to check
a little small town.
I need to check the numbers, but it's a very big town for someone from Australia like myself, especially a city like Adelaide.
Yeah.
But I'm planning on spending a bit more time up here on the north side of China and exploring some different cities, regions, sites, and then maybe I'd like to move south after that.
What do you see yourself? I mean, it's all very hypothetical, but say 5 years or so from now, if you're thinking that you may be here, what do you see yourself doing in the next sort of 5 or so years of your life?
Well, I haven't forward planned that far. This is all quite a new adventure for me. I would like to spend maybe a couple of years here in China, and after that I would like to move west towards Europe and start a new life in Europe, I think, maybe. A new adventure.
And normally, what were you doing back home? Were you recently out of school, or you been working, or what's kind of your story from back home?
So I was studying exercise and sports science in Perth, and while I was studying, I was working in a kitchen, cooking Mediterranean-style food, mainly pasta.
Well, look, thank you for being on the special edition of the show, and let's hope we get to Seoul in one piece tonight.
Fantastic, sounds good.
Thanks, brother.
Beautiful.
All right, so next up on the special Airport Adventures edition of the podcast is my new friend Samuel. Samuel, it's good to meet you today.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Samuel is your English name, and you actually are from where originally? Where's home?
Actually, my home is in South Korea, but we can go home now.
Yeah, we're waiting on our flight. We just talked about that with Daniel. But so you're actually Korean. What's your name in Korean? Because they're Korean listeners for the show.
My Korean name is Kim Se-hyung.
Nice. And so what brought you to China? Why were you in China?
I just for studying here, and then just for study, and then I ready for go to another country for the study.
Okay. And we were talking earlier that you also went to high school in Maegwa. In my country, and then you're here.
Yeah, and then come here and then study.
And what are you studying? Like, what's your focus? What do you want to be when you grow up?
I just want like translator.
Okay.
So first I want to study English or perfect, and then second like Spanish, and then so I want to translate for that one.
Very nice. And so, are you finished with your school, or do you have a little more school left?
Have more some, but the school is not important because I can just go another school and then for study language, so that is not important.
Are you going to come back here to study, or are you moving on?
Yeah, I will come back because my girlfriend is in China.
Ah, okay, very nice. So why did you actually come to China specifically? Like, why China?
Actually, I want to study in here, but my mom said now in Korean everyone can speak English, so you must go Chinese and then learn Chinese, and then you will get a good job. So my mom said spending here, but I like in China now. So I have a girlfriend, and this in culture, so I will like it.
So what, besides your girlfriend and the culture, what do you like about China? What else do you like about being here?
China, like studies like hard. The teacher study like teaching is like hard, but another country is just blah blah blah. But like Chinese like army.
And you like that?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. Why do you like that?
Because like maybe in Korea like study like teacher I will rest and that's a rest, but Chinese not like
you can't do that.
Yeah, so like help good at study, so it's good.
Well, do you hope to spend more time in China in the future?
Actually not, because like I want to be translator like English or Spanish, so
Okay.
I will go Spain because like actually I want to my job like look have some football, care about some football.
Yeah, you're wearing what us Americans call soccer, but you're wearing a football jersey right now,
Yeah.
actually. So you're a big fan.
Yeah, so I want to like jobs, football, care about some.
And he's wearing a Ronaldo jersey in case anybody's got brand loyalty.
Yeah,
All right, Samuel, it's really nice to meet you.
yeah, good.
All right, and lastest but not leastest on the Airport Adventures edition of the podcast, I have my new friends Alice and Youn. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
So let's start with Alice because you're next to me. My traditional first question for people is who are you, where are you from, and why are you in China? You're actually from here, though.
Yes.
Sort of.
Sort of. Who am I? That's a complicated question.
Yeah, that's why I started with you.
So in terms of, I guess, identity-wise, my family's from Hong Kong. I've lived in Vancouver, Shanghai, LA, Melbourne, Paris, and now I live in New York. And the reason why I'm here in Beijing is for business. But I think China is just overall a great place to travel, to visit, and to work. There's a lot of opportunities here now, and just a lot of great people. So, yeah.
Nice. Youn, same question for you. What brings you here to China?
Well, I'm South Korean, and like Alice here, I've been to a lot of places. I was actually born in the UK, and then I spent a few years in the US, and now US studying, and now I'm just in China studying Mandarin. This is actually my last day here, and I'm trying to go back home to Korea.
Very nice. And we, of course, as I've said earlier in the show, is that we met because we all got stuck. We got stuck thanks to the awesome mechanical track record of Asiana Airlines. So let's give them a shout out on Twitter. Negative shout out. But in terms of the China connection, so you both have been here for business in your case, for studying in your case. We have something in common in that you both spent a lot of time in LA.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You discovered that, and you're not traveling together. You met here. We all kind of
No.
met at the gate, which is really kind of fun.
That was a lucky coincidence.
I know, it is a lucky coincidence because, not to embarrass her, but Alice here was able to get all of us into this nice first-class lounge. So we have a comfortable place to eat and drink and relax.
But on top of that, we actually found out here that we're from the same university.
Yep. Fight
How
on,
cool
Trojans.
is that?
Sweet. Well, I've got a lot of friends back home. The show's got a pretty heavy California contingent.
Oh.
We've got a lot of Trojans who will be who are listening to this, so they will like that.
Woo! Right on.
So, it's late and I'm tired, so I'm not on my usual game with this. But I mean, we've been hanging out, and it's been interesting to hear your stories. Maybe just talk a little bit. We'll start with you, Alice. But like, what is it that you do, and what are you looking to do in the next few years, such as you're comfortable to talk about? And that'll be your question as well. I mean,
I'm in a sort of like a period of transition right now. So my background was in mostly business, in the fashion industry specifically, and right now I'm trying to sort of make the transition into the blockchain world. So it's a very new adventure for me right now, but I would be doing mostly community work, as well as building, I guess, global cross-cultural resources, and be involved in like hosting different events. So yeah, it's exciting, and I'm not really sure where I'm going to be in a few years. I'm not really even sure where I'm going to be in a few months. So.
I don't know where I'm going to be in a few hours, frankly.
Yeah, exactly.
We might be here.
We might be still here.
We might be recording the sequel to this. Well, so I'm imagining, and I guess it's kind of an obvious thing, what appeals to you about this kind of job and pursuit? I mean, you've grown up and spent all this time in different places around the world. So I imagine that digital currency especially, it's something that you're kind of like built for in a way.
Yeah, that's actually one of the main reasons that drew me to this sort of industry. My friend who's been in this for a couple of years now, which is pretty long given the history of this whole industry, and the way he put it is that not just digital currencies, but that is obviously what most people have been hearing about in blockchain, but blockchain itself, like this technology, and in terms, if you look at it from like a social, philosophical, like technological perspective, it's really truly the first, I guess, borderless, I guess, initiative ever, because even if you look at, companies nowadays, they are mostly still like very nationally driven, like, Alibaba and like Tencent, they're like Chinese, or Amazon, Facebook, YouTube, they're still American, but with blockchain, it can really open up a borderless community, which is something that I'm really interested in.
I have a fair amount of friends, some of whom listen to the show, so hi there, who are involved in this world, and people in Silicon Valley and in San Francisco. And I've had more than one friend refer to this as a very transcendent technology, and they usually mean in sort of a spiritual, hippie-ish way, but it is transcendent just on a practical level. It transcends borders, it transcends boundaries, language issues, things like that. So the potential is unlimited. I think in the medical field, that's something that one of my friends specifically is working on, how blockchain applies to medical records and things like that.
Yeah, like education records too in the future, and just anything that involves like data and transactions, which is, a lot of industries.
Sure. And how about you, Youn? What are you? I know a little bit about your background from talking to you earlier by the gate. Seems like I've known you both for a month, but that was actually 7 hours ago. But what are you? You're finishing school now, but what is it that you're looking for in the next few years?
In the next few years, well, I'm going back to the traditional educational route. I graduated last year, and I'm taking a gap year. During my gap year, I just found some time to study Mandarin, so that's why I came to China. Now that I'm done with that course, I'm going to spend a few weeks in Seoul, back at home, and then fly back to Boston, where I'll be starting my law school degree. I'll be back in school for 3 years, and then after that, I don't know where I'll be working. Maybe in Korea, maybe in the U.S., or maybe possibly in China, if my Mandarin is up to.
And so you mentioned Boston, and that's Boston College?
Yes, Boston College.
We were talking, what's funny, you don't know this because we all just met, and so you don't know the show. For some strange reason, I have no Boston connection. I swear, a third of the guests on the show have got a Boston connection. They're from there, they live there, they went to school there. So there's a big Boston thread, and so thank you for keeping that alive.
Yep.
Little fist bump right there. So in terms of being in China, what do you enjoy about it? What does it mean to you to be here? Do you especially enjoy it, or is it?
I loved it so much. I think one of the things that surprised me the most was that I didn't know, I knew that China was a big country, but then when I actually came here, I realized that each province has its own different culture, and then each province has its own different language, and they have such a special emphasis on food, and then that just surprised me so much. And then, so when I first came to China, I was just here for my main purpose was just to learn Mandarin, but then when I actually came here, I decided that I really needed to take an opportunity to learn about all these different cultures. So I've been traveling a lot. I've traveled to 10 or 11 different provinces.
Wow.
During my time here.
Just all those things you mentioned impressed you so much. Has there been anything that stood out the most, or is it just that each province really is kind of its own almost its own country in a way?
The most interesting thing actually is that in each and every one of my single trips, I've met so many interesting people on the road.
Okay.
Yeah. So last week I was in Yunnan province, and then I was just traveling there alone. I was supposed to go to Kunming and then Dali and then Lijiang. That's the traditional route that people take. And then I was at first a little I was a little bit worried because I was just traveling alone. I might not know the language there because they have a different dialect.
The dialect's very different,
but
right?
then on the road, I met another girl. She was also traveling there, and then we were just driving on our motorcycles, and then on the road there we also met 3 different guys. And so on that day I was supposed to take a train from Kunming to Dali, but then we canceled it, and then the three guys, he drove a car, and then we went to Dali together.
Wow.
Yeah. That was one of the most interesting things that happened to my life.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So I'll end with Alice, because you actually are essentially our Chinese representative here on this episode. What does it mean to you to be Chinese, if I can ask that question. No pressure. It's kind of a big question, but
That is a
That's a big
question.
question.
well. So let me narrow it down a little bit. So, given that question, in terms of the future in China's ascending role,
Yeah.
I mean, do you have a certain sense of, pride or mission to do certain things, or do you think of it that way, or you?
Yes, actually, it's funny you asked that question because I've been thinking about it a lot recently. So I grew up sort of, I guess, I want to think it as like a very special period because I moved to Shanghai when I was, I think, 8 years old. And at that time, Shanghai was very different from what it is now. Like Pudong, which is, I guess, like
There's the big
east
airport,
of, east of the Huangpu
It used to be a
River.
swamp or something, right?
Yeah, it literally was a swamp. Like when I first moved there was one tall building, and then it was like farmland swamp. And now it is probably one of the most postmodern, like
Totally.
looking places in the world.
It's pretty amazing, yeah.
So I like witnessed that growth, I guess, sort of. And so it's been very interesting to watch not just Shanghai but China in general like grow in terms and develop, technologically, and like just even like the people, their understanding of the world and being more global. And back to your question of how I feel about that, is I do, because a lot of my friends are sort of like me. They're ethnically Chinese, but they have like more of an international background. And in the past, we don't really, like, we never knew we would like place our Chinese heritage in this place in the world. But now I think increasingly a lot of my friends are moving back to China, because we all think that is where a lot of the opportunities are. I guess there's sort of like a rise of global Chinese citizens in the world, like everywhere, not like in the US and the UK, Australia, wherever. And I guess we sort of share like a common heritage, and we want to, I guess, sort of bring China to the world, but also bring the world to China. So, I mean, that's a big dream and big goals. I'm not really sure exactly what I'm trying to do, but, just like making friends with you guys and making friends with other people in the world. Hopefully, people who've never thought about coming to China will come to China because of that.
And last question for both of you: how would you describe China in like a nutshell to people who don't really have a clue?
Be open-minded.
Same, I think.
Yeah. And China's like a big place,
Yeah.
like she mentioned earlier. So like every province has its own like culture and sets of rules. So yeah, just come with like, an open mind, and don't believe what you've heard, because there's a lot of things out there about China that's, you come here and you're like, that is so not true.
Definitely. It's so hard to categorize China as just like one thing, because there are just so many Chinese people, and China is so big.
Yeah.
China has such a rich history and culture that it's so hard to describe it in one word.
Awesome.
You just have to come here and experience it for yourself.
That's a perfect place to end. Thanks, ladies.
Thank
you.
Let's hope that we get our flight in about an hour and a half. All right, that's the show this week. Don't forget, I have more long-form interviews coming up starting next week. I have 3 interviews I'm actually doing just in the next 3 or 4 days. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.